to just recap what we've spoken about up until now so that you can make sure you understand everything that has been covered until this point. So we started looking at creating content from the point of view of creating a clock and everything that should be included in a clock. And we went through a clock in detail with regards to how you would break it down if you needed to prepare a clock for me. And then we said if you want to prepare a clock, there are a couple of questions that you need to ask to be able to know who your target audience would be for a clock. And that would be things like, what time of day is the show? Who is the show for? What are they doing at this specific time? What is the predominant value proposition of the show? So in other words, what value will the listeners get out of it? What do you want the show to be known for? And then what problem is your show solving? And then from there, we started looking at link formatics, where we said that a link is in essence the spoken time between the microphone being switched on and the microphone being switched off. So that is a talk link. And then from a talk link, we went on to speak about the house of a link, and we spoke about the two different types of links that we get, and that was a promise link and a performance link. And we said that a promise link is also known as a tease or a throw forward, and it's something that's telling your listener that what they are about to hear will be of value to them. So that is your promise link. And then your performance link is the link that the promise has been building up towards. So this is now where you have your listeners' attention, and now you need to make it worth their while. And whatever you promise them, you need to execute here, okay? And what makes a performance worthwhile is that it is emotive. It has to be emotive. It has to evoke some sort of an emotion out of the listener. So I need to make my listener feel something at this point. And then we spoke about different weightings for different emotions. So things like the biggest emotion we want to feel is happiness. Okay, happiness, humor, positivity, then sadness and curiosity or intrigue. And then we spoke about the bigger emotions like disgust and fear. And then we said the one emotion we never want to evoke out of our listener is anger. So me as a presenter, I don't want to anger my listener, but I can get a character, a caller, to anger the listener. And then we spoke in detail about the fact that you are referring to one person only, okay? Because we are having a conversation. So you and I are having a conversation. So I'm not going to go, hey, everybody out there. Hey, all you guys. Hey, everyone. I'm going to talk to you and only you so that we can keep this conversation momentum going. Okay, so at all times on radio, you only refer to one person so that we can have those conversations. And then we moved on to look at how you would structure a link. And link structure, we referred to the Mexican on the bicycle. So obligation, one thought per link, obligation fulfilled. And then we looked at what is an obligation. And we said an obligation are things like the name of the song and the artist that just played, the name of the show, your station ID of the station that you work for, things like the time, etc. So those are your obligations. And then the one thought per link just refers simply to sticking to exactly that, one thought per link. So don't go off track and try to find other conversations to add to this, okay? So the one thought rule, every piece of content should be created around one thought, one idea, or one theme. So that's what it comes down to. And then from there, we now moved on to the 5 rules of storytelling. And those were the hook, the crumbs, the dress up, the payoff, and the blackout. So the hook was the most important part, okay, of the link. I played you a couple of clips of hooks so that you could get the idea about what a hook is, as well as how to execute it, how to incorporate it within your content. So the hook is the most important because it needs to grab your attention. This is where I need to get your buy-in. If I don't grab you here within this first 8 seconds, what are the chances that you're going to be tuned in for the rest? Okay, it doesn't matter how good the rest is, then I've already lost you because my hook wasn't strong enough to keep you. Yes. If we were still at the beginning of 2000s, then we would have a lot more time to grab our listeners' attention, okay, and it won't be so difficult. But because a lot of years have passed now, things like a hook needs to be shorter because our attention spans keep getting shorter because of the information overload that we have. And we have to multitask. So we need to do a couple of things at the same time because we are time poor. So the hook, very, very important. And then on page 122, we spoke about a couple of tricks and applications that can help you construct your hook. And those were things like ask your listener something, set up conflict immediately, make a strong declaration or a strong statement or proclamation or a pronouncement. And then make them curious because people are naturally curious. We are naturally curious beings. Okay. From the hook, we moved on to looking at the crumbs. And with regards to the crumbs, we said, think about Hansel and Gretel walking and dropping crumbs wherever they go. Similar to that, okay? So as you keep talking, you keep dropping mini payoffs. So payoffs, giving you little bits of information that keep you satisfied, okay? So we add little twists, little turns in the story to keep you engaged and to keep you intrigued until the very end. So the aim of the crumbs is to set up and establish something that pays off later. So that is what the crumbs does, okay? So every link has to have a forward momentum that leads as a path or crumbs toward the payoff, because that's what we're ultimately waiting for, is the payoff of the story. So no matter how good your hook, so now I've hooked you for the first little bit, but if the setup of your body doesn't take this link forward, you're going to listen to something else, okay, that requires your attention. And just because I've now hooked you in the first 8 seconds, your attention span hasn't suddenly become an hour long. It's still the same length. I still need to drop crumbs every 7 to 14 seconds to make sure that I keep holding you back the whole time. Okay. So 3 things to avoid during the crumbs is to try too hard to make someone laugh. If we can pick up that you're trying to make us laugh and you're not getting it, it's extremely uncomfortable and awkward, and we're going to stop listening to you. So if you can make someone laugh once, awesome. If you can make them laugh again, even better, okay? But stop there. Carry on with your link. If you have too many phone calls or voice notes, once again, if these phone calls are brilliant, okay, and they are all great stories that have different angles to them and have strong hooks and payoffs, and they add to the entertainment of the show, great. Then you do all 3 pieces, okay? But if they don't have all of those elements, you don't do them, or you do one, because you're going to lose your listener. And then the last one is not sticking to one thought per link. Okay, so one thought per link. Don't be all over the place with a lot of stories. And then your crumbs have been set up as follows. So we have our hook here, and then it's the crumbs, which is the body, and the crumbs first piece of content is the second strongest. Second piece of content is the weakest of the 3, but your third piece of content is the strongest, the biggest, the climax, the crux, the payoff. Why is it that the weakest can be placed there? Because I already have your buy-in. You are already listening to me. You're not going to go away now because you want to hear what the payoff does. You want to hear what actually happens. So you will stay tuned at this point. Okay. So within the crumbs, so within your body, you have your second strongest piece of content first, and then your weakest piece of content second. Then you have your payoff after that, and then the blackout. That's that structure. So hook, the crumbs that has your payoff in it, and blackout. And the dress up simply refers to the crumbs as the extra layers. What else are you adding? What are you doing to make this link better, bigger, more entertaining, more engaging? Okay, so that is what the dress up refers to. There are a couple of ways that you can get your listeners to buy in here or to engage with you here. And the first one is to get their buy-in. So there are different ways that I can do that. And the first is to get me to agree with you. If you can get me to agree with you, you have my buy-in. Then we spoke about keeping it short, sharp, and simple. because we are always engaged with something else and we're listening with half an ear. Then we spoke about painting a picture, emotive language. Me closing my eyes and saying to you, imagine a time when, or imagine if, or picture this, or think about this, or what if, or when last. Okay, all those type of questions. Those questions that evoke emotion, my imagination, that gets me to imagine something. And lastly, speak in the active voice, not the passive voice. So don't say something like, let's say I am drinking water at the moment. My active voice would say, I am drinking water. My passive voice would say, water is being drunk by me. Way longer, okay? And that makes it a little bit more difficult on air. Unfortunately, you might write in this way. So it's something that you're going to have to work on to get out of. So that is in essence storytelling. Okay, so you start with your hook, then you have your crumbs, and within your crumbs, you'll have your payoff, and within your crumbs, you'll also have your dress up, and then you have your blackout. So simply getting out of this link. That's where I'm going to start with you now with regards to the execution rule of 4. So successful broadcasters are ferocious planners and are simultaneously able to sound spontaneous with confidence. So as much as you plan your show in detail to the last T, you can still sound like you are being spontaneous with confidence, like you can pull it off without a flaw. There are a couple of guidelines that we need to look at with regards to show prep. And we're going to look at each of these individually. The first one, they says plan for all segments beforehand, hold weekly planning and brainstorm meetings, plan to insert the character and personalities into everything you prepare, and then build the links with the P2 listener in mind. We've just kind of recapped again and spoken about content, and I'm sure you can surmise how important it is to have a solid plan for your show, taking into account the hour of your day, the type of content that will be in that hour, and the format of your link, because different hours have different listener groups, meaning different content, meaning different way of putting it together. So now it's time to fill in the actual link, okay, the actual content. And this is where we're going to be looking at the planning sheet to help with this process. And the planning sheet starts with a reminder of the execution rule of 4. So before we carry on, what was that execution rule of 4? The execution rule of 4 referred to the teaser, the trouble, the muddle, the triumph or the kicker, the triumph or the failure, and the kicker. So the teaser is where you are presenting the characters and the obstacle. The trouble is presenting a conflict or allowing for a desire to arise. The muddle is where the initial strategy leads to something new, so a new obstacle. The triumph or the failure is the moment in which the strategy is either successful or unsuccessful, depending. And then the kicker is the ending, in which the changes that took place as a result are depicted. So we start with asking 4 different questions. The first question is, what is the payoff for the listener? Okay, remember when you start prepping, I said start with the ending. Because what is my listener getting out of this link? Okay, what is the payoff for them? Secondly, how am I going to write the hook? What am I doing within these 8 seconds to make sure that I'm hooking my listeners? Thirdly, what is my view on this topic? Bring in your personal side, okay? Personable. So what do I think? What are my views? What is your view as a listener on this topic? And lastly, what can I do to add more layers? Okay, how can I dress up this piece of content better? If we need to put all of this in a template, we'll say story, tease, setup, point of view, exit. Okay, so how you would come up with your story is by using a tease, then the setup, then the point of view, then the exit. The execution rule of 4, the hook, the payoff, your point of view, what else? That is it, okay. So from these answers, we're now able to create the link planning sheet, which looks like this. So this is the link planning sheet, okay? Plan for all your segments beforehand, like we've said. So show prep can be quite a daunting task, and it's extremely important. It's really important to have these things prepped before you go on air. if we look at this planning sheet, the link planning sheet, we start with a summary of the story. So what is it overall that my story is going to be for a couple of lines? Then the emotivity. Write down the exact emotion you feel about the topic. So what is it that you feel specifically about this topic? And then what is it that you want your listener to feel? Okay. What emotion do you wish to evoke by telling the story? So what is your listener going to walk away with? Then we have the promise. Okay, so the promise link, which is your throw forward or your tease. So you're going to script that link for me. Then we have a hook. So how are we going to set up this hook? To engage with the audience within 8 seconds before they tune away. What specific words will create the maximum impact? So that's what we need to think about here, okay, when you write your hook. Then we have the point of view. What is each cast member's point of view on this topic? Can you share a relatable story or a personal experience? What emotions can you express? What are the thoughts in your head? What is your opinion? So that's all part of your point of view. Payoff. What is our intention? Is it humor? Is it conflict? Is it deeper emotions? Okay, sadness. Where are we going with this? And if a good exit comes up spontaneously during the segment, go with that instead. Right. And then the last one is what else? So ask, what else can we do to make it bigger? So can we introduce an expert or a guest? Can we have a production piece? Can we have conflict or controversy? Can we have a story extra, a viral piece or media coverage? Recognize what content could be bigger and what content is perfect as is at this point. Now that we've answered these questions, we're able to create the link sheet. Okay, so now we are moving on to the 4 parts of the actual link, which is this. All right, so the 4 parts of the actual link is the promise, the hook, the setup, the payoff. That's it. So that's now where we take it. And every single link, regardless of its nature, could be planned and documented and executed using this planning sheet. Okay, so using this link planning sheet and then breaking it down into your link sheet. So we have different types of links. The first type there is character stories or storylines. Then we have serialized content, also known as a story arc. Then we have out of studio. So we have vox pops. We have listener games or features or promotions. We have interviews. We have phone topics. We have produced skits, sketches, parodies. We have holiday stuff and events. So things like Easter was just up, and during Christmas, we also hear a lot of content. And during June, we hear a lot of Youth Month stuff. During August, we hear a lot of Women Months content. November is Movember as well, but also near the end of November, we start with 16 days of activism. So we have a lot of different themes during the year that we also focus on with regards to content. And then we have something that would be new or buzzworthy and videos or viral pieces. On 702, there is a feature where there's a UK-based man who talks about the Twitter trends every day. So with regards to Twitter trends, not just things like politics or current affairs, okay? He'll talk about whatever is actually trending and stuff that's interesting and entertaining, and he will bring it across in such a way with his descriptive language that you can picture the whole scenario. Obviously, you can't watch the actual video at this point because you're listening to the radio, but the way that he brings it across is so good that you can literally imagine the scenario. Okay. Right, so those are the different types of links that we get. And then from the links, again, you have your promise that you've put together, then you have your hook, then you have your setup with your crumbs, with the dress up and the whatever other layers you want to add there, and then we have your payoff, okay, as well as your blackout, which will go with the payoff, and then you're done. So now we're talking about show planning and brainstorming meetings. It's very important that you have a weekly planning and a brainstorming meeting. And within these meetings, each producer or presenter or anyone involved in the content of the show should come prepared with ideas for the following week's content. These ideas should come from using the planning sheets. So the link sheet or the link planning sheet. Ideas and stories come from a lot of different sources. We know this. So from, for example, presenters' personal experiences or books or stories or articles from social media and the internet or other places like daily subscriber-based subscription services, okay? So we get subscriber-based prep services that will prep for you if you pay a certain amount. So we're going to start by looking at these subscriber-based prep services. These are services that producers or presenters can pay for, and they can be very helpful in collating stories and ideas for radio people. So the first one I want us to look at is radiowarfare.com. Win the battle for the listeners. Supercharge your radio show. So you can see there's stuff here for presenters, podcasters, producers, and programmers, depending on what you're looking for. So this is the UK's premier daily prep service for radio presenters. It gets delivered every day at 5 a.m. And you can have a 7-day trial for £1. Okay, 7 days for £1. What it entails are things like headlines, stories, showbiz news, music, sport, lifestyle information, surveys, birthdays, ideas, and just about everything that you need, all written, edited, and laid out and ready to go just for you. So that is what would be within this specific show prep. Okay, lots and lots of stuff. And you can get shorter versions and longer versions, like you can get a 3-pager, or you can get up to 25 pages, or you can get a weekend edition of this thing. And here you can see the monthly subscription prices. So you can pay as you go. There you go. Okay, so this is the first one, and then we're going to look at bits and pieces. So they speak about the bits and pieces prep sheet, also in the UK. Obviously international as well. So you can do a free trial on this one, so you don't have to pay £1 for it. So you get news, gags, competitions, talkers, phoners, and prompts to get your show interactive. It's a full sense of the day as to what is going on in the UK and around the world for internet community, local and national DJs. And the price starts at £11 a month. So this is the other one, okay, bits and pieces. So they give you some examples in page 132. Example 4C and 4D is what we're looking at now. So 4C speaks about Dr. Dave's ultimateprep.com. So a subscription service that delivers stories and ideas to your inbox. You can see this daily chat is made up of 3 stories. So this was for October 2019, which means there's a big chance the stuff might not be applicable to us today anymore. So the first story says, make your Halloween pumpkin last longer. A topical story for Halloween. Even if it was in October, this story still wouldn't be that big for us because in South Africa, carving Halloween pumpkins isn't such a big thing. So not really made for us. The second one there says, pearly white teeth is not enough. Interesting and weird fashion story about people who would temporarily paint their teeth a different color. And then the third one there is a story that speaks about children and credit cards, potential and personal finance advice. So this is a story that can be used by us in South Africa. I can already imagine people reacting to this story. So let's go through that third story. So children and credit cards. The bottom line says there, the do's and don'ts of giving your child a credit card. Research has shown that American parents often lend their children credit cards for online shopping. The number of parents that have done this for children under the age of 18 years old is around 50%. Almost half of them wish they haven't done so. So around 50% have given their children credit cards, and around half of them wish they didn't. Parents are also letting their children have their own credit cards. Research from T. Rowe Price reports that around 18% of children aged between the age of 8 and 14 have a credit card. The reason parents cite include children being able to buy things themselves instead of asking their parents, and that it teaches the children financial responsibility. However, there are certain things one should consider before deciding on this matter. And then it goes on to speak about the age of the child, discussing spending limits, make the advantages and disadvantages clear, explain the pros and cons of credit. And then they say children should be taught about money early on in their lives, and they should be given some responsibility. If they make mistakes, it will prepare them for situations that they might encounter later in their lives, where they will have to face bigger consequences. And then they give you thought starters, so something like hooks. Do you let your children use your credit card? Have you ever regretted giving your child access to a credit card? What happened? How old do you think someone should be before they have their own credit card? Okay, so that's the one prep service, subscription service. That one was really actually quite interesting. Okay, and then the second subscriber-based prep sheet there is the daily subscriber-based sheet. So that's 4D. You'll see it looks a little bit different to the other one, because here we give you specific days. So we tell you that on this day, this is what happens, what type of days it is, what events are happening today, whose birthday is it, the birthday quiz, South African one-liners, world one-liners, entertainment news, a word puzzle rather, so brain gym, and then survey of the day and 5 things that we learned this week. 2 different ways that you can get prepped. The one gives you like this story, and the other one gives you content for pretty much your whole show to use. So those were those 2. Now let's get back to your PowerPoint. This brings us now to the RIP formula. And this does not refer to rest in peace, okay? RIP, researched, internalized, performed. So this is on page 136. So using these prep-based sheets that we've looked at can be quite tricky, and it's recommended that you never simply copy and read the content sent to you on air as is. There is a way to utilize the content more effectively, and that is this RIP formula from Stone and Geiger, which is a method of making sure that the content that is being produced from sources other than your own thoughts or shares would be changed in such a way that it will suit your personality. Okay, so you take the content that you've been given and you change it up to suit your needs. The first one there would be researched, and that says look for material that makes you excited or makes you react emotionally by either laughing or becoming angry or by becoming intrigued. Be sure that the station's audience will also find it interesting. If they might not find it interesting, don't use it. If you're not 100% sure how they will feel about the content, do not make use of it. All right. Then I is for internalized. Ensure that your content has been personalized. Right. Become emotionally involved when you talk about your content. The audience wants to hear what made you react to the specific piece of information. I want to know what made you react always to a certain or specific type of information. So that's quite important. And then the last one there is performed. So when executing the content on air, emphasis is important to be placed on the actual performance, okay? So your delivery. It doesn't matter how good your content is. If the way that you are delivering it is poor, then the content is going to be boring, okay? Doesn't matter how good your content is, if you have a poor delivery, the content will be seen as poor. So that's something big you need to focus on at all times. So then there are other helpful tips and guides that Stone recommends, including taking the now researched and internalized content, and then asking yourself certain questions regarding these. The type of music or sound effects. Think about music overall and how important music is. Music plays a big role in our lives, right? Music has a way of bringing out the emotiveness within us. So music can evoke emotions out of us as listeners because we always associate music with certain feelings. So certain songs would make us feel happy, certain music will make us feel sad. So adding music or sound effects to your link can also bring another level to it, okay? Make it more relatable, more entertaining, more engaging. Also, apart from that, using music is another way of making sure that you are keep hooking your listener every 7 to 14 seconds. Because just because we've hooked you now at the beginning doesn't mean I now have you for the rest of the time. I need to keep hooking you, and by using different music elements or sound effects, that's a great way for me to distinguish and for you to hear different things that will be happening. So for me to hook you the whole time, okay? It's by using music or sound effects. The second one then is the number of people who should be involved in the segment. Are we using everyone on the show? Is it only me and one other person that I'm utilizing? Will only I speak about this link? Who are we getting in, and what are their roles within this segment? Then if you need someone to ask a question, or rather, do you need someone to ask a question to get things going? If that's the case, then you get someone, okay? Radio is theater of the mind. We fake certain things. So then get someone to ask that question to get stuff going, to get the ball rolling. Similar to if you need someone to call at the end. Do you need a caller at the end to start off your kicker, to drive the questions in a certain direction? Then we also prep that, okay, beforehand. Does the material lend itself to an audience quiz or a mock news bulletin or a fake advert or a humoristic sketch? So this is all the questions that we should ask so we can figure out what type of content piece we are doing, where it should be placed. And then once the content is ready to be performed, rehearse and then re-edit your content if need be. You don't need to rehearse it out loud, but be sure to remove any irrelevant information and make the piece more accessible. Then we have a couple of further techniques that we can look at. So Johnson provides a couple of further techniques. Whether the source of the content comes from harvesting your own life or from a prep service, anything can be turned into content if you mine it properly. So that's quite important. The first one there is contrast. So what does contrast mean? It refers to us feeling two different emotions at the same time. So let's say, for instance, I might feel sorry for someone, but I might be laughing at the same time because it's funny. So that is contrast. How we use this is in such a way that we are getting the audience to feel somewhat conflicted or polarized by the content, so about the content. So create contrast to add drama in a storyline by putting a personality in an awkward or an unexpected position. Then exaggerate the story to bring out the suspense within the story. So for example, if you have a spider-related story and the show member is scared of spiders, lock him or her up in a room full of spiders. That's quite scary. Couple the stunt with the original story to keep it relevant and topical. People will be feeling very sorry for this person, but they'll also be laughing because it will make for quite interesting humoristic content. The second one there says resolve a conflict or dilemma. Build conflict up, then resolve the tension. So this is used in television sitcoms a lot, but it also works for radio. The third one says seek the extreme. So exaggerate your topics or your ideas or your characters or your personalities as well as your listeners. Find the most extreme example of what is being spoken about and get that onto air. So for example, instead of an ordinary phone topic like what did you eat when you were depressed, turn it into something more like a quest where you can find what is the most anyone has ever eaten in one depressed sitting, for instance. And then a top 10 list. Do me a favor and never pull a top 10 list from the internet and simply use as is, okay? Because it's been done. And I want you to always remember to add something personable into your links. So how would you do this? Rather, take stories and create your own top 10 lists, things that happen in your life, in your day-to-day. So you as a student can probably rather use something like, what excuses have you used to get out of class or to get out of handing in your assignment on time, for instance? You can start by using this kind of more ordinary topic. And then as time goes on, you can dramatize it by coming up with the top 10 all-time best excuses for getting out of class or getting out of a test or whatever it might be. Okay. So in this way, you are also using stuff about yourself. You're also bringing in your personality and making sure that we get to know you as a presenter a little bit better. Then make it a game. So people love games. It is what it is. Games are an important element to add to your repertoire as a presenter. And it can be any game. Okay, some games are very silly games, but they are still played and they still work. Whatever your game might be, then you can add a guest. So guests can be really boring on air. You can't simply just put on anyone on air just because you want to make up the airtime. Sometimes, though, a topic or an idea calls for having someone external to add to your storyline. Here we want to add a guest that will add to the entertainment and the education or the engaging nature of the content pieces. If they won't do this, then we don't put them on air. It's as simple as that. Then the second last one there says discuss personal life and opinions. A great source of content can come from your own life. So it's called the slice of life. Never forget that, okay? I found that quite a few people think that their lives are quite boring. Not the case at all. Very relatable and relevant, actually, especially if you sit and go through all the emotions that you have on a day-to-day basis. We go through quite a plethora of emotions on a day. There's a lot of things that happen to us that we can talk about, okay? So there must be a balance between good and bad personal stories, though. You can't just have bad or you can't just have good. So a good story will deepen the brand character and it's not just about the presenter. Don't make your listeners feel excluded. That's a very big one to remember. Then lastly create unique, original content that only you can perform. So stuff that only you can do. The single best source of content is personal experiences and observations from your life. That is the best thing you can have, possibly. Who is a P2 listener? I haven't told you that yet. Who will be your P2 listener? Your P2 listener will be your secondary listener. So if your favorite radio station is YFM, but on occasion you will listen to Metro FM or 947, perhaps even Kaya, then you are the P1 listener, so the core listener for YFM, but you are the P2 listener for your second, third, and fourth option. So for Metro, for 947, and for Kaya FM, you are the P2 listener. So the secondary listener, not the station that you switch on to listen to first, but where you will go if your first choice doesn't have anything on it. So what we mean by building links with the P2 listener in mind is that we will build content around these people. Why? Because we already have the P1 as the core audience. We already have them. So we're trying to get more listeners to grow the radio station. And how do we do that? We do that by getting in my P2 listeners to become P1. So you would have heard on the weekends that there's other types of programming that will play. That is called block programming. So over the weekends, we have block programming, specifically because we are creating programming for the P2 listeners in mind. So we are steering away from our normal day-to-day programming. Also things like the Ask a Man feature. That's an example of a feature built for a P2 listener in mind because it evokes appointment listening. Okay, it gets me to listen to the radio station by appointment because I know a certain show will start at a certain time on my radio station and I will tune in for that specific show. Okay. So that is what we have referred to there under the P2 listener. And then we looked at your RIP formula that we just spoke about now, which is what you use if you're using any content that you haven't come up with. So if you are using content that you've purely gotten from the internet, you should also be using the RIP formula. Okay, if you pull your sources from the internet, use the RIP formula to recreate it in such a way that it'll work for your station. So researched, internalized, performed. That's the three things that are important. And then we spoke about Johnson's other techniques, lastly now here, which was contrast, resolve a conflict or dilemma, seek the extreme, a top 10 list, make it a game, add a guest, discuss personal life and opinions, create unique, original content that only you can perform. So that is literally it. You can see here under homework, it says using a prep service, a story from your favorite website, or a personal story, use the above techniques to create a piece of radio content. So please try and see whether you can use these, okay? Because, I mean, you are recording for me for your assessment, which means that you're going to get info from somewhere online, which means that at some point you need to recreate this info utilizing the RIP formula. And perhaps even Johnson's techniques there. So please try with this, okay? Please go and practice and see whether you can do this. So in next week's class, I am going to go through your assessment marks with you, okay? And your overall assessments, just so that you can see how I marked. Then you must have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday, and we'll chat again soon.